I'll call to order this meeting of the Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board, December 18th, 2018. Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Did we have minutes to look over? I did not check, Peter.
I sent them out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sent those out. I think I have a set missing that I haven't done
Okay.
at the meeting.
Okay.
But I'll get those done.
Great.
Motion to approve the minutes?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I'll abstain, having not seen them. All right. Instructions on accessing the town's YouTube channel to view our Harbor Shellfish Advisory Board meetings. Peter.
You just go to YouTube and enter that. Enter Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, Nantucket, or put Nantucket before it, and they'll all come up. And it's interesting to look at the camera view and how it shows about maybe the first 3 rows of seats, but not all the way across. It kind of cuts them off on the sides. So you can see Kona sitting there. That's it. And it you know, you can't hear anything unless you talk into the mic, unless we talk into the mic. So we gotta make sure we do that, and also gotta make sure that when we have people coming to talk, like we had the scalpers the other night, that they have to come down and talk into the mic if they want to be heard. And you should maybe say it in that way. If you want your voice to be heard by more than just us in the minutes, you got to come down and speak into that mic. And if you're sitting in the audience and talking back and forth, no one's going to hear that. So you need to, we need to just get people to come down, and, one of us, before the meeting, we can place the mics in places where they can come in. It's too bad we didn't have a remote mic that you could pass around and make it easier for people. But then, the reason you come down to the mic is so that when you're talking, you can be seen on camera. So.
Well, good point, and I'll be sure to do that. It's always on my mind, and sometimes it slips my mind and the meeting gets...
But we do have a couple of regulars who regularly watch the meeting, and one of them tells me how important it is to,
Doesn't
to him
seem,
that he,
doesn't seem as though they're on now.
well, I don't know if they're broadcasting, but
I've got a green light on mine.
yep.
Sometimes just one being off can maybe mess up the rest, but anyhow, update on Pulpus Harbor channel dredging. I really have no update except for, as far as I know, the job has commenced, and Sheila's not able to be here today. She's already traveling for the holiday, she informed me, and I have not heard from Jeff today. So, Marine Department report.
Well, hold on.
I'm sorry.
They are working nonstop, because I went for a walk on Sunday, and they were working on Sunday. And if you guys recall from the last meeting, Sheila said they have a deadline of January 15th to get it done because of winter flounder season. So they're not going to be stopping. Plus, they have to be worrying about potential storms that may come along in January. So.
I was there Pulpus Harbor Sunday also, and I didn't look at it in detail, but I did see the spuds in, so
Yeah.
they're there.
Mm-hmm. And if
Where does the material go?
It's going to go on to, they bring it to Steamboat Wharf, and then it goes on to trucks, and it goes to the dump to be held in reserve for whatever the town needs it for, I guess.
I think the latest we were told it was going to be stored off the Bunker Road
Oh, okay.
at maybe near where Miles Reese's is on airport property.
Are they just doing the approach to the harbor, or are they going inside the harbor?
I believe it's a channel project.
Yeah, it looked like they were over by that old bulkhead, or a little bit outside of it. That's
So they're well inside the harbor then.
not that far in. I was actually looking at other things in the telescope, so sorry. I just noted that there were spuds there, but not exactly where.
Spuds being
The post that they put in to hold the barge.
okay. Right. Thank you for that, Peter.
Yep.
Anything more?
Nope.
Thoughts, questions? Marine Department report. Sheila, like I said, will not be here tonight. Natural Resources, not seeing Jeff. We'll continue right down to old business unless somebody has something to say about anything previous from Marine Department or Natural Resources here on the board. All right, the hazardous materials containment, continued discussion. The three of us were at the select board meeting where Mr. McNeil presented a plan to eliminate all fees for both residential and commercial. The select board showed a concern and asked him to add at least one more collection day because he informed us there were 6 collection days a year. I was under the impression there were 7. But maybe now there will be 7 or 8. It sounds as though they interpreted our letter of advisement to them as we were looking for not only a facility, but a facility that would be manned and open every day that the dump is open. So I've thought that maybe, we should come up with another suggestion that 1 day per week, and if they could continue to look into having our own building to store it in. Mr. McNeil did say to me via text that the DEP does not allow a municipality to have their own collection facility. He did not put it that way at the select board meeting. He explained that he would prefer that a collection site not be all contained in one place in case there were a spill or a problem because of the aquifer being so close at the landfill area that maybe it wasn't a good idea to have. He'd rather actually see the materials spread around where they're at their job sites. Not sure that I agree with that analogy. I have not tried to get in touch with the DEP at this point. If there's anybody here on the board that is accustomed to getting through to the DEP, I'd welcome some assistance in some research. Mr. McNeil also mentioned that we should research how it's, I believe, every commercial entity that handles products, or maybe it's how much they generate per year. I'm not quite sure, but they're supposed to be registered with the DEP and keep a log of the materials that they do accumulate and how they dispose of them. Some, such as, let's say, automobile garages, call out private contractors such as Safety Queen to come and pick up their waste. I believe it's Queen Harbors that does it for the town. They had a chart showing that right now a little less than $60,000 a year is spent on household hazardous waste collection. The contractor who does come and get it, I believe, once again, Queen Harbors, prefers that it's done the way that it's done. They would rather handle the materials directly from the homeowner or business person. So there's a lot to think about, I guess, and quite a bit more research to do. It would be interesting to know how many contractors are registered and versus how many are supposed to be registered. I think there's still a lot more that can be done with public education and outreach on this matter.
Mr. Chairman?
Fritz, please.
I just would mention that the planning board meeting last month, just say that at the last few planning board meetings, we've started our meeting with a half-hour presentation or question and answer of numerous department heads. And last month was the DPW and Mr. McNeil. And one of the things, the question was posed, what can we do as a planning board?
Excuse us, Fritz.
Are you looking for HDC? Zoning board. I don't know about that. See, but there should be a meeting going on above us in the training room on the second floor. That might be them. Okay. Sorry, Fritz.
Yep. Where was I? And basically he was asked, what could we do? He mentioned hazardous waste. We said, what can we do? He made a recommendation that we, the planning department, consider requiring as a condition of issuance of a building permit, a plan to dispose of hazardous waste. The comment was taken, and so far no action or discussion has been had on that item. But he did mention it, and specifically mention it in that way, which I think is, we asked somewhat the same question when he was before us, kind of, and I think he suggested maybe the same thing.
It was actually part of our letter of advisement to them that, and it was a two-part letter, being the facility at the landfill for collection and attaching something at the building department so that each job site is required to have a spill-proof container that does not collect rainwater also, with the job site dumpsters just simply being too convenient for everything to go into. And I've actually recently saw a container that looked like it was manageable by one person or two, and it looked like a convenient container to be on a job site.
Okay.
But excuse me, didn't Mr. McNeil tell us after the meeting that it's already a part of the requirement for the building permit that they keep their material contained on the site? Didn't he tell us that?
Yes, but not in a specific container.
Okay.
He expected them to basically take materials that were not used up at some jobs and carry them on to the next job, a scenario that I believe is really not practiced, but he mentioned them being left behind with the house and stored in basements and garages at the houses themselves. I don't recall a specific container outside,
Right.
So which was also of question and concern, I believe, by the select board, that practice actually being effective or not.
I will raise that at the next planning board meeting specifically. Pose the question to the staff as to what the department's requiring, and see what reaction I get.
Mm-hmm. And it could be very simply checked off during a footing inspection or foundation inspection someplace in the beginning of the job that this vessel is on site and acceptable for storage and containment. As far as how they're dealing with it after that, if they're supposed to be registered, the building department checks all contractors to make sure they're home improvement contractors. That's a registration, and also somebody has to have a construction supervisor license to pull the permit. So these are simple things that are checked off anyway. To add one more thing to it, hopefully wouldn't be burdensome to the inspection process at all.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe.
this is an anecdote. It's a personal experience. I just picked up a building permit. There was nothing that suggested that we had to have any sort of vessel to contain hazardous materials. So, anecdotes don't make facts. Maybe they didn't tell me to do it, but by no means was there any requisite for me to make sure that we had a vessel on the property to do the job.
Well, that's what we're looking to move forward to have. Is there any instruction within the building permit of how to at least handle it, how to dispose of it, when to dispose of it?
No, I didn't see any of that. And the other thing that I walked away with, I listened just to that select board meeting where Mr. McNeil spoke. It took away several things. Number one is that the town, all jurisdiction over hazardous waste material is the DEP's, the Department of Environmental Protection. The town does not or has not issued any regulations to that fact. That there are 3 types of generators of hazardous waste, as I understood it while he was speaking. Households, small generators, small companies, and big generators. And that you really needed to have different rules and regulations for those people. But none are evident. And that he cited the fact that if you look at most communities the size of Nantucket on the mainland, they only had 6 to 8 hazardous waste days a year. And that he felt for what we were generating for household, that was enough. But I don't think, I don't remember his addressing the medium and the large generators. How was that taken care of? And he also talked about a fee schedule for the amount that you brought to the handling on those days. And my recollection again is that households were never charged, and then there was fees depending on how big the generator was beyond that. So it seems to me that there are no town rules, and that, to effectively do this, we probably have to be within the guidelines of the DEP, but that we can issue some regulations, the town can issue some regulations that would oversee that. I mean, I just had a front door painted with oil paint, and I had to tell the young man working that he couldn't pour his stuff in my driveway, that I wanted it taken away, which was met with resistance. On the other hand, after I talked to him a bit, I said I would take it and put it in glass jars, and I will take it to hazardous waste. But there has to be oversight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, give somebody an inch and they'll take your entire arm.
Mm-hmm.
And when I explained it to him, he got it. He just didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real educational gap here.
Yes, there is.
We unfortunately look at this as a small town like on the mainland, but the amount of construction that goes on here is not equivalent to a town of 20,000 people on the mainland. It far exceeds that, both in primary building and in renovation and just painting your house periodically. We're on a slippery slope, and it looks to me like we really need to generate some guidelines. Not throwing any stones at anybody, but it seems to me that there has to be rules and regulations attached to the building permit.
No, this is just something that has gone unaddressed, I feel. The select board seems to be very receptive, and Mr. McNeil is very transparent and responding. Is he responding the way I'd like to see? Not exactly, but he's willing to listen, and I think we need to keep chewing away at this and hammering at it, so to speak, and trying to come up with some more suggestions that hopefully they'll meet with some compromise at least. Some of these I've personally witnessed on job sites. It's amazing. There literally hundreds of gallons of paint can get used in a 5-bedroom house. Sometimes the house will get completely painted, and then they'll decide to change the color, and more paint comes in, and so and it does not get left behind with the house for touch-ups. These houses, especially spec houses, are sold clean of absolutely anything in them except staged furniture. So there's no room with touch-up gallons of paint left in the basement. Very seldom. Ginger, please.
I had no idea of the actual volumes, and I just think of it as the days when I would take my gallon or two and wait in line for an hour. And in recent years, when I have been able to go, the lines have been a lot shorter. So the household seems to be the smaller volume, and I don't if we could somehow separate the small, medium, and large in some way.
Well, to answer Joe, I believe Mr. McNeil made it clear that the large generators, they know that they're large generators, and they know what they're supposed to be doing with it. And I saw a Safety Clean truck here yesterday. It was behind the Mid-Island gas station, on Island Gas, and so they make rounds to certain places. Are there garages out there, working without knowing this? It's certainly possible. There's a lot of vehicles here to be serviced and a lot of oil changes being done. So, and as far as the rates go, it was $60 for 25 gallons, and this is what they're waiving. And at first, it did bother me personally because it seems like it's just making development a little less expensive for the developer or the contractor. But Mr. Brace put a positive spin on it for me, and it's a step in the right direction to make it easier and more convenient. But there's always seems to be somebody who doesn't realize how easy it can be, I guess, or there's a time frame involved when this stuff needs to be gotten rid of now, and those are the incidences that I'm concerned with. Mr. Coates, anything to add?
No, I'm just
Okay.
taking it all in right now.
All right.
Looks like you're on top of it, so I'm glad to
Well,
see it.
I wish I were. I wish I had some more information, and don't know what I'll be able to get done between now and our next meeting with the holidays. But remind me, Peter, to ask you about our future meeting dates. I see them here, but I want to talk about them at the end of the meeting.
Well, it sounds like, Mr. Chairman, that the planning board is on it, and we would just be looking to Fritz for an update on that.
I will make a motion and proposal to them, and we'll see what response we get.
You and maybe a little presentation on the large generated amounts and the scarce times to be able to get rid of it, and and the dumpster being so convenient on the job site. We're afraid that a lot of this is just going straight into the dumpster and trickling out the back during a rainstorm. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Ginger.
should we write a letter to that effect to the planning board? We could vote on our just a simple statement of what you just said, and Fritz could take it to the planning board from us. Can we do that?
My original letter should kind of have it covered. The letter of advisement to the select board. If you wanted to add to it as a presentation, I believe it's our job to send our letters to the select board. To do so to the planning board, Peter, could you comment on that?
You know, I mean, if that's the ear that we have to shout into, you know, and it applies to, I would assume, all the other boards on the island. If we need to get them a message and they can affect the change, and they're the ones that we would advise, then by all means, I would think.
Fritz, would it help if there was some membership from this board there?
Got to get it on the probably on the agenda. The problem with planning board meetings is we got so much stuff to do that
It'd probably be at the end of the meeting, right? Little things are.
I try to do it at the beginning. At the
Oh.
end of the meeting, you may be sitting there for 3 hours before you get, and then you get people who, you know, it's a situation where people are impatient because they've been sitting there talking about a lot of stuff for a long time.
Yep.
So you're much better off. The presentations that we had from the department heads always came in the first 30 minutes, but so there is a time period there, and we could. My suggestion would be that the chair or request 10 minutes of time to discuss the issue of hazardous waste on the job site, and then basically come in and make the appeal, and I'll help facilitate getting it on, making sure that it gets on the agenda and discussion. But that's what I would suggest, as opposed to just me.
All right. Well, shoot us out information as it comes together. If you get it on the agenda, I'd love to know.
Yeah, I mean, the agendas get put together pretty late.
And
The next
I've-
meeting is January the 14th.
I've got quite a bit of notes on my presentation to try to get the point across, if that would help at all. But I think you.
I mean, if somebody
got
would
the
make a
gist of it.
presentation, short, I mean, it doesn't have to be elaborate. Just
Right.
a short presentation.
No, the shorter the better. It's to the point. It
Yeah,
needs
to the point. I'd
yeah,
be happy to have a motion
Yeah.
to basically, I'm just kind of playing around with it right now, which would, something to the effect that asking the staff to implement procedures
To have a job site containment system
yeah,
of some sort. Okay.
and see what kind of traction we get with the board members.
It would be nice to know what the response is.
Yeah, because we can, if you can get a positive vote, and a positive vote from the board, then the staff really has to do something, as opposed to just discussing it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sounds productive.
If was that a motion?
I'm sorry?
Was that a motion? If it was a motion, I would second it.
I don't know if we need a motion here. No, I meant a motion at the planning board.
No, I understand. I just didn't know.
And make a motion.
I can't make
to-
one, but you certainly can, Ginger. To solidify the fact that Fritz is going to make a presentation on this subject at the planning board.
I thought Fritz was asking you to come to the planning board.
It would be help with somebody other than.
Yeah, I'd be glad
I'm
to.
carrying a lot of baggage right
Yeah, yeah.
now. May not be the best proponent.
No, I mean, it's just I'm glad to follow this through as long as it takes, and it seems like it's something that could take years.
Well, the idea does seem to be, if you'll pardon the expression, percolating. So,
Yeah,
It could be. The other way it could be handled would simply be a letter, and if the letter is then posted in the package, then I would certainly feel appropriate to raise the issue and a vote.
you get printed out packages.
Yeah.
It's not all on.
Yeah. So a letter from you asking that the planning board consider it at its next meeting, for instance. That letter would get included in the agenda and the package, and you wouldn't necessarily have to be there. We get letters from.
Needing to be submitted by when? You'll have to let me know on that.
The 14th, 14th, so Monday, the package, usually the agenda, the Wednesday before. I don't know what that is for the 10th.
so could we craft the letter by January 8th, or should we be doing it tonight? It sounds like the shorter the better, but just what we've said.
Well, Andy already has a letter.
Yeah.
Okay.
The letter could actually be, the letter to the select board you could just forward it to them and ask that the issue be placed on the agenda.
Well, the first portion of the letter is more related to the DPW.
Okay.
The second portion is much shorter, just pertaining to attaching something,
Okay.
a regulation to the building permit
Then,
process.
Ginger, I think, and I'd agree
So
with
we-
you. I think what I'd suggest is that we take that letter and that somebody modify it to be something directed toward the planning board and procedures and and reviewing and implementing procedures. And we could approve that on the 8th, and then the next day would be that's Wednesday. Presumably that's Wednesday, I guess.
Okay.
That's in plenty of time because the meeting. It's just as long as it's in by the time the meeting gets posted.
All right. Well, before I'm willing to do that. I'll revise my letter. But Peter, I was noticing, I'm going to jump ahead to this now as we start talking about dates. January 8th is the second Tuesday of the month, the first.
First Tuesday is New Year's Day.
Yes. So
So if you
do we know we have this room for January 8th and the 22nd, them being the 2nd and 4th versus the 1st and 3rd?
I'll make sure I ask.
Let's be sure that's clarified and we don't have to have no meeting on the 1st. And when would our next meeting be? The 15th or 14th? If we have to stick with 1st and 3rd, and that's a 5 Tuesday month.
So I guess we're not quite ready for a motion, but we could add it to the agenda for our next meeting. And then we can vote on your letter, and then it can be sent off.
Okay. Anything else on this subject?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was just reviewing all the stuff that happened in my mind here. You were saying that you were introduced to some containers that would be possible to be used here on the island. Could you describe those containers?
I just happened to glance at one recently during a drive. It may be down at the wharf area or in the Wilkes Square Electric Company property there, but I'm not sure. But certainly there are containers out there. What are your thoughts? Having a suggestion of something they could use? I'd bet you that Granger already has containers like this that are available, and there's other companies that cater to commercial businesses for certain products like this, clothing, gloves, boots, all absorbent pads. So, and containment is one of them. One acquaintance would be a oil burner service repairman, and he was recently ordered to get it's a shed type of containment shed that he keeps his oils in from changing filters and whatnot. The filters actually hold a lot of oil,
Right.
and he slowly drains them into drums. And he was informed to have a certain building, and it's a very small building. And he ordered it. It holds about, I don't know, 6 55-gallon drums upright. And what if they were to spill and break, this building actually can contain that many gallons within itself without spilling out. So the whole bottom of it came formed in one piece, and then the roof sits on top of that. That would, for a much larger scale, what I saw downtown was simply roughly the size of a 55-gallon drum laying on its side, and it looked like it was hinged, and the top portion opened up, and it said hazardous waste right on the side of it.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman,
Joe?
question. If these containers are going to be on island, I would almost think that if the DPW is not going to take care of them, that whoever is going to be picking them up would provide the containers. You know, it would make sense to me that they probably have a truck that can lift them, put them in the back. So it's not just going to be a random thing. If you have more than one provider, they're going to provide different containers. I mean, it's sort of like trash pickup. You know, those trucks can pick up a particular container, dump it in the back. This would be something you'd pick up and slide onto some sort of container truck, and you'd be able to get X number in there on a certain load. I mean, I would think that it wouldn't be our issue to decide what type of container. It's more the issue of deciding that you're going to do it, and then find some service providers who would then provide the containers, or at least tell you what to buy specific to them. You know,
I wasn't visualizing these containers being picked up by a carrier. I was visualizing them being something the contractor keeps, brings to the job site when it's needed. When the job is done, he has to take those things out of that container and bring them to a hazardous waste day. The container moves on to his next job. But good scenario. It'd be nice if one of the 3 local rubbish collectors had a division that dealt with hazardous waste.
I
I mean,
That's-
As you mentioned that, Joe, all of a sudden I'm thinking of that orange container in the doctor's office where all the
Right.
syringes and everything goes,
Yeah.
and it's a bucket.
Yeah.
There's a
It's
company that
plastic
comes
bucket
and
that
fixes it.
gets picked up, and
Incinerated.
You know,
I mean, somebody can charge for it and make money.
Right.
Yeah.
That's contemporary outsourcing. You know.
But then
mean,
it's permitting the
municipalities
building.
Probably don't want to handle it themselves
Right.
because again, you're bucking the DEP.
Mm-hmm.
The DEP makes the regulations on how to contain the stuff, how to pick it up, and where it's going to go. You know, I think it's a can of worms to think that we could do it on island. I mean, one of our local companies that deals with trash would probably have to be certified by the DEP.
And have a certified holding area,
And then you have,
if they're even allowed.
you can probably then have a way of dealing with oversight because you know that it's being done correctly. So if you have a building permit and you're building an X size squared house, you're going to expect to use so many gallons of paint, so many gallons of foundation sealer, all those volatile products. The container can be delivered and you can put your stuff in there.
Now all of a sudden, though that's convenient, now you're adding a large cost. To some, you would think the cost doesn't matter. To others,
Yeah.
the cost does matter.
I think
So,
what we're talking about now is what Mr. McNeil describes as small, medium, and large generators. I'm talking about the large generator. You know, I mean, that person, the hand labor, it would seem to me, to put it in a container, take it out of the container, put it on a truck, take it to the dump, would cost more in terms of steps and man hours than having it just picked up and taken away. That's why hospitals outsource all their waste. They don't take care of any of it.
okay, there's
You know,
the
that's
key
just the
word.
concept.
Can we get hazardous waste materials outsourced? The collection of. Yeah.
Contemporary business management calls for outsourcing. Nobody wants to do it in-house anymore.
Well,
I
isn't
think
that
it'd work. I mean,
basically?
for the
Oh,
small
sorry.
home- I mean, for the small project, the guy that's going and getting his own building permit, yeah, you make it simpler. I mean,
And he,
you could buy it. I mean, you think about it. I mean, you want to have your water tested. You go to the drugstore and you buy a bottle that's specifically for testing your water, and you do it, right? Same thing. It would just be there to be a bucket. I mean, Marine Home Center could sell the buckets for $10, and you just have to get the bucket, and you have to put the stuff in the bucket and take it to someplace.
All right, all good ideas that we need to make note of for future suggestions and advisement. Shall we move on? Anything else? All right. Continued discussion with eco-friendly moorings.
Nothing more at this time. I think.
Sheila really wants you to get together with her.
Oh, she does.
Yeah,
wants you to go down and talk to her,
Oh,
Yeah.
happy to.
because then she can cut out this whole meeting process and just tell you everything.
I mean she made it pretty clear, Fritz, that as far as the helix goes, I'll repeat what she had to say. Was quite a few of them have been abandoned and can't be found, and the ones that are in use are using chain anyway. And of course, her biggest problem with them is her concern about a scalloper fetching up on them, which if we were to do a pilot area, there's plenty of places where scallopers never go, where there are lots of moorings.
Plus, she said that the boating demographic had changed since the Helix moorings came on the scene. Now everybody has a bigger boat, and those bigger boats that are on the helix moorings are causing the people who are nearby to have to move because the radius is, I guess, larger.
She also mentioned that some actually dislodge and pull up.
Okay, I'll talk.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I was finding a certain logical contradiction in the idea that they came up too easily, but that that a scalloper could hang up on one and pull his boat under. I mean, there's rocks out there that you have to avoid. You know, you snag a dredge. Yes, it's a pain, but but the practicality of having to move things around as, you know, boats change, people come and go, sizes of boats change. I could see that as a practical difficulty, and so, you know. So.
Well, the our main concern or liking to the helix is that it's supposed to eliminate the chain, therefore eliminate the chain scour, and if we're not achieving that with the helix, then it certainly puts a hamper on it. I hear conflicting pros and cons, and I've spoken with one mooring handler who said he'd be glad to invest in the installation equipment if they became the popular way to go for moorings.
I guess what I'll just make a couple of comments. I'll be happy to go talk to Sheila, so I can firsthand tell her at least what I've learned or talked to. They shouldn't fail. Town of Marion, I talked to the harbor master there, and in 20 years they've never had a single helix mooring fail. So that's one thing. Now, maybe we're a sandier bottom. I don't know. But in any event, they shouldn't fail. The second point would be, I've talked to the eco-friendly mooring manufacturers, and they basically say they will not guarantee their systems unless they're attached to a helix mooring or a dead weight, and would not guarantee it if it were attached to a mushroom. So it seems like we're dead in the water until we can get something other than a mushroom. The third comment I would make is, yeah, we have a more vibrant scalloping fishery than many other harbors do. So, you know, maybe we have a unique problem, but somehow it seems like we ought to be able to sort through it. So. But I'm happy to talk to her. I mean, I do.
Okay, well, try to do that, Fritz, and I'm more than willing, you know, to continue.
Yeah.
Because this is
It
just
may not be by the 8th because of the holiday
Yeah.
and everything else.
this is another one of those things. Unless we just let it slide, it's going to take time to make progress with.
Yeah. I mean, I think
So-
many harbors, they use GPS so they don't get lost. They have a response. You know.
I think there's several methods that can be used that it does not get lost.
Yeah. So,
And to keep from getting fetched up on it, having a winter stick on it.
okay. I'll follow
think-
up with her.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Joe.
when I remember looking into this with Fritz, and one of the things that I remember reading clearly is that when you disconnect the line, the road, I mean, not, yeah, the line or the piston or the elastic bungee that they put on it, that when they do that, they have a GPS coordinate of where each mooring is. When the line comes off, which you have to dive, they take down a cap. The cap is screwed on over the hook so that in reality, there's nothing you can get hooked up on. And I remember looking at this thing. It's formidable. I mean, it's a quarter turn with sort of like a wrench-like device. I mean, can one come off? Maybe, but it seems to me that that's not an issue that's been reported in places where they use a lot of them. I think North Carolina was one place, Australia was another place where they become very popular. And you know, the issue here is eelgrass. Do you want to preserve the eelgrass? What does it take? Well, it's clear that the scour from chains is counterproductive. So the next question becomes, how do you move to something where you get rid of the scour? Do you really want to get rid of the scour? Again, it's down to some, to me, binary questions. You know, how many of those caps have come off? Is the eelgrass coming back in areas where people use helix moorings? And my understanding was that you couldn't use a chain on a helix mooring, that they provided you with one of these lines that was a piston, and that those pistons could be adjusted based on the size of a boat. You know, I would think that a helix mooring that's anchored 4 to 6 feet into the bottom is going to do a hell of a lot better in terms of not moving than you do with a mushroom on, you know, being dragged across the bottom. Just, again, opinion.
I visualize that same picture that you just painted. So I agree, and I'd like to hear from some mooring handlers. Otherwise, I guess, you know, to prove it differently.
The other questions to me are, what are the state regulations? What are the local regulations? How were they written? Why were they written? I mean, all that stuff's got to come to the surface, and we have to get to the bottom of where this chatter is coming from. If it's legitimate and we shouldn't do it, so be it. But in the meantime, we really need to have our facts delineated in a very clear way. Who makes the regulations? Where are they made? How do these things work? What's the failure rate? How big a boat? What's the largest boat you can put on one? I would think somebody with a 36-foot boat does not want it swinging in open water. Those are the guys that are in the rack or they're in the, you know, in the slips at Nantucket Marine.
Well, I mean, in the anchorage in the summertime, there's
For sure.
plenty of large boats
Right.
out there,
But
especially
I'm sure
sailboats.
they dole out the space
Yes.
pretty conveniently. So if you can do that with mushrooms, why can't you have a grid? I mean, you know how many boats you have. You know what the average size of the boats in the harbor is. You make your grid so that a number of 36-foot boats are in one part of the harbor. Little 20-footers and 18-footers are in another part of the harbor, and that's how you dole out your space. It may not be as convenient as it is right now where you just go out and you drop stuff, but do you want to protect the eelgrass? That's the question to me over and over and over again. All you got to do is look over at Tuckernuck where there are no boats moored. Boy, is that stuff lush. I went out there, it was the end of October, at low tide, going the wrong way. It's a challenge because that grass is 4.5 to 6 feet high in places, and it's beautiful, you know. Because I thought maybe I could scallop out there, but there's no way I could stand up in it. Again, anecdote.
Yeah. All right. Let us know what you find out, Fritz. New business. Ginger, you wanted to talk about the Nantucket ditch.
Well, I did, and thank you, Peter, for giving me that link to the estuaries report. I'm still kind of trying to digest it. One thing I couldn't determine just from a quick look was what was the original from 2010 and what was the updated part. So I wasn't sure. They did the tide gauges initially, but I was confused about whether they were keeping up with that. And one comment that stuck with me was that the ditch was an inefficient means of exchange, and I would agree that that's still true. But I just would like to hear if the rest of the board has thought about this area and what thoughts are.
There was ditch discussion a couple of years ago at the select board, back when Bobby DaCosta was on board. I can remember him suggesting we should be looking into our own dredge for the ditch. It's probably, I would probably have to agree with you that the ditch is a poor means of circulation to begin with, but what else can we do with Long Pond and its ditch situation? It's been like that for how long? And now that we've created this monster of a landfill there, has only added to the problems.
The I don't know how many years ago, but the Department of Public Works under Jeff Willett got a special machine, got the permits from the Army Corps of Engineers, from DEP, and went and cleaned out the Nantucket ditch and all of the mosquito ditches.
I don't know if I could agree with that.
Okay, I could
But
maybe dig up the stories that I wrote
Yeah.
about it.
really,
But they did all that, and there was a matter of what you did with the spoils, because the spoils would then create further places where stagnant water could exist, which then was all about cleaning them out so that they would function, so that the mosquitoes wouldn't be as much of an issue. And there were all these permits that they had to get, and they had to buy this special machine that didn't do very much damage to the.
well, when he outfitted that machine, and when he used it, I thought he was the results were frowned upon, and he was asked not to use it again.
Okay.
The machine was actually an auger that sent the spoils up, broadcast them outside the ditch, basically in 360-degree manner, and it covered the vegetation and looked quite unsightly.
Right.
And the machine once again sits and rusts, and has not been used since the one time that it was used. How far he got with it, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But I know that is probably not a machine that will be brought back into use again. It used to have a backhoe on it, and Buddy Ayers used to run it as a track-driven machine made by Bombardier. And back in '98, that machine was actually out to bid in surplus equipment. And he decided not to sell it because bids were quite low, only one or two interested people. So that's when it got revamped.
Yeah.
And with the new attachment on the back. But I was living in New Hampshire at the time, so I really, give you the benefit of the doubt of knowing more than me on this. But from what I had heard, he was asked not to use it again because of the mess that it made.
Okay.
But Ginger, you
Well,
seem to be.
I think I saw them doing it out at Eel Point. I don't know how far they got. They might have done, the salt marsh by where Andy Lewis's house was, that one.
How recent?
It's quite a number of years ago.
2006, 2007, maybe.
Somewhere in that sounds about right. That's about when the chemistry of the pond changed, and we started to get a lot more salt water in Long Pond. So the time frame makes sense. As far as the machine, the spoils going on either side of the ditch, as Peter said, created shallow water pools, which were ideal for breeding mosquitoes because they weren't draining into the ditch, and so it was counterproductive. A lot of the mosquito ditches, I think, were originally dug as part of a civilian conservation corps in the 30s. So that was how they got started with the idea. It was basically just to put people to work, not necessarily a lot of, deep engineering thought was put in at the time. But the question to me is how could you actually effectively it's two questions. One is, do we really want all the pollution from the dump going out into Nantucket Harbor? Is there any efficient way that Long Pond could be cleaned out by having it interchange with salt water, and if so, where? Because the Nantucket Harbor, there's a significant disconnect between the tides in the Sound and the tides in the ocean. So they're 3 hours off. So that means that the interchange with the ditch is more dependent on rainfall and the moon than it is it's not on a twice a day tide cycle. It's and I think when they initially did it, they did the pond for 8 days instead of a full lunar cycle. I think they did Nantucket Harbor for a full lunar cycle, but there again, it's what are the sources and how would you short of turning Long Pond into a salt marsh and opening it up in some major way to either the Sound of the ocean, I don't see that as permittable to begin with, and I don't see it as practical because it would just fill in with retreating coastal dune, as it does, every winter. So I don't know if it's better to vent or to try and vent more into Nantucket Harbor, or if we just resign ourselves to the fact that the pond is going to be seriously impacted, and try and deal with the dump separately. I mean, I don't know what their plans are, so I don't have any answers. I just have questions.
As far as I know, the mosquito ditch trenching is being fully abandoned, and the town wants nothing to do with maintaining mosquito ditches anymore. And I was told this by a person who has one on their property that had a clay culvert that collapsed and now has some puddling water in their property, and they were asking if it could be maintained, and they were told, if you'd like to maintain it, you're welcome to, but we're not going to come out and work on this. Now, as far as the ditches from Long Pond, there's a lot of studying that needs to. You have great questions and concerns. Is flushing the pollution from the dump that ends up in Long Pond, if it does, and eventually into Hither Creek. Is that the right thing to be doing? Very good question, and I believe, I thought that the Land Council was doing some monitoring of how the landfill operator is handling things with their runoff, and it would certainly be good to know. Certainly the DPW is supposed to be watching over how they're handling things also. You're more than welcome to take this on and get some information and bring it into us and share it with us and give us your thoughts. And maybe Jeff knows something also that we don't, and has an opinion of his own of where things are going with the ditches, and if they have any plans to continue maintenance or to drop that. If we call it maintenance, to keep a ditch open requires digging. So, that would be maintenance, just like a channel into a harbor. I realize it's a different habitat and conflicting habitats. So, if there's an ecological issue that you think is happening there and needs to be addressed, please take it on and bring it to us, because I think it certainly falls under what we're here to do. Anybody
Okay,
else?
so I'll see if I can get a little more information.
Mr. Chairman, I would just mention that I believe I'm correct in saying that when Rob McNeil made his presentation to us, I believe he said that they were monitoring, they had water quality monitoring that the DPW was doing, and that those water quality results are or would be posted on the DPW website.
Okay, thanks.
Testing around the landfill.
In Long Pond or in wells that are around it.
That's where I'm not completely sure of what he exactly said. I know, I believe that the Nantucket Land Council and or Department of Natural Resources were actually testing the pond around. Whether, I don't recall whether Rob McNeil said they were testing the pond or they were testing in sites on
the town does test the pond. I mean, that they've been doing that all along. It's I guess I'm
That would be health department, though.
right. Yeah. But the Jeff, I think Jeff's people also the
Natural resources.
the position that the woman just left.
Yeah,
And Caitlin left, and so I don't know what's been updated with it. But yeah, they did that regularly.
And I understand they filled that position. But I think that there are wells around the landfill that are tested. So
sounds right.
I would check the DPW site, Ginger.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't get to that meeting, so.
Yep.
No, everything is online, and I hate staring at the computer screen. I'm sorry.
Yes. Anything else on this subject? Ginger, I'll ask you before our next meeting if you feel you've got some more information to share to continue this. And Peter, you'll look into our dates.
Yeah, I'll call Maria
with
Davis tomorrow.
availability, okay. And I guess after the break, the holiday break, I'll get in touch with board members if you update me on those dates and clarify what our next meeting or when our next meeting will be.
Okay.
Any items for next meeting? Or a recap on tonight's meeting with anything?
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Coon?
I was interested in what you were talking about with the oyster drill, and did some research on it. And apparently, it is a threat to scallops. But also, I came up with an interesting fact that the rays that are in the harbor love to eat bay scallops also. And much like the green crab, I never knew anything about the predators that we have that
Rays.
have been feeding on the like the manta rays, and I don't know what kind of rays we have. There's different kinds of rays, but
We have a skate that kind of looks like a ray.
so I was just wondering, maybe, of course, it'd be nice to have the Jeff here to ask him what the department might be doing, or somehow look more into it, these predators that are in the harbor that are affecting the scallops, and if anything's being done to address them. But did you find anything more about
No.
the oyster drill?
No.
It's kind of interesting
Nothing
that
at all.
they apparently are a threat to the scallop, and of course they eat through oyster shells, but they have no problem going through a scallop shell either.
Right,
You know?
right. I mean, if they actually drill into an oyster shell, then a scallop shell would be a day at the beach
They
for
look like
them.
little periwinkles.
Well, the November 8th issue of the Inky Mirror with the article on the state of the scallop season at the beginning, Ken Kelly was quoted. He's a former town biologist, and I'd love to know more about them also. So if you're volunteering to
I am. I'm going
to stick with your
do some-
predator program, you know, you're also more than welcome to find out from Emily Molden and share with us if she's found out anything, or what time of year she expects to, you know, when's the most news come out about how they're studying the green crab, and because I know last spring or fall they were
We're doing a count
painting
or something.
numbers on
Yeah,
them,
that's right.
and
See
you
if
know,
they
do
migrated.
they have any results from that yet? And or when is, you know, the next time they check that they may have some results. So if you keep up to speed on that for us, it's certainly an interesting topic in my book. All predators. So you know, and how they're balancing out, so to speak.
Yeah, I shall do that. Yep.
All right, and I'll be in touch with you before our next meeting. If there isn't anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.